Hi y'all, welcome back to my shop. We're going to talk about turning handles today. I'm going to demonstrate how to do that. Why would you want to turn a handle, you ask? Well, there's several good reasons. You know, your handle might have broke. You might have had a tool that comes with a handle you don't like. We'll talk about that a little bit more in detail as appropriate size later. But there's a lot of good, really excellent tools out there that come unhandled, and first and foremost comes to my mind is Doug Thompson's tools, which are excellent. But there's also Sorby makes most of their tools for their sovereign handle system that comes unhandled, and sometimes you get some great buys there. P&N from Australia makes some good unhandled tools, so that's also an option. I think sometimes the biggest reason though is you may make your own tool, and it may be a small tool like a pyramid tool, or it might be the tool we did recently from a piece of high-speed steel where I made a 1/8 inch parting tool. So there's any number of reasons why you make handles. I'm going to show you the way I do it. It's not necessarily it's not the only way to do it. It's not the best way to do it, but it's the way I've done it after a certain amount of tool handle making experience and watching and studying and reading up a lot on the subject. So let's get started. In this project today, I'm making a replacement handle for this Benjamin's Best 5/8 inch. 5/8 inch being the way the Americans measure the size of the bar. As it's delivered, it's about a little over 13 inches long. The key to handles is leverage, and it deals with the amount of tool that's extending over the tool rest. A good source for information, frankly, is the first couple of pages in Craft Supply's catalog. They've got some really good information on tool size, tool handle, and extension. And what they suggest is you should have generally a minimum 5-to-1 ratio of handle back here over the area compared to the area extending over the tool rest. They suggest that for a half-inch bowl gouge, you know, we're looking at somewhere around 15 inches or so, because the tool can extend safely about 3 inches over the tool rest. With a 5/8 inch tool bowl gouge, it should be able to extend 3.5, so that suggests a length of about 17 to 18 inches. Quite a bit shorter than the handle that came delivered with it. So I'm going to make one about 17 inches long. Let's talk about woods. You can make them out of most any kind of hardwood you want. The key is you want reasonably straight grained wood. You can make them fancy with laminated wood. I've done a number with cherry and maple, and if you mill you a nice long blank, you can chop it up as you need it and make, you know, if you got a 6-foot piece and cut off handle sizes as you need it. So that's always an option. But very dry wood, straight grained, and a hardwood. In this case, I'm using Bradford pear, which a lot of people consider a trash tree, but it's surprisingly hard, and I keep a lot of it in Spindle stock, so it's readily available. So that's what we're going to use. I'm going to go ahead and rough this out. We're not going to get into a lot of detail on mounting tween centers or roughing. I'm assuming you got that information under your belt. I'm going to rough it out, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk a little bit more about size. Let's talk briefly about how big the blank ought to be wide. I didn't mention that. I like to go for about 1.5 inches. Some people suggest 2 inches. I think that's a lot of wasted wood, and it's a lot bigger than you need. If you'll check most of your handles, I think you'll find them to top out somewhere around 1 3/8 at the widest spot. So that's the approach that I'm using. In terms of how I'm gonna go about this, let me just cite the steps. First, you get the appropriate wood. You're going to rough it between centers. Then we're going to size the front for the ferrule, and we're going to get into more detail on all these steps. We're going to put the ferrule on it. I generally like to go ahead and epoxy it. We're going to put a tenon on the back so we can hold this in a chuck, because I generally drill with the Jacobs chuck in the tailstock. Some folks drill the other way. Both of them work. I like to put this in the larger chuck jaws when I can, so sometimes when the wood is approaching 2 inches, I don't get it completely rounded before I go ahead and put the tenon, so will fit in my larger chuck jaws, because I feel better using my 2-inch jaws rather than smaller jaws with a smaller tenon. So let me go ahead and size the tenon. That'll work. We talked a little bit about the minimum size that ought to be based on a 5-to-1 ratio of the tool overhang. I think it's worthwhile mentioning that bigger is not always better, and the best example of that is on the tools such as a spindle gouge, where you don't need it to be that long. You don't need that much leverage because you're not going to overhang that much on doing your normal spindle work. Here's an example of a 3/8 inch spindle gouge, and Craft Supply suggests that the maximum overhang for that is, I think, about 1 inch. So that would suggest a handle of 7 inches, maybe plenty. This handle is about 10 inches, and it was a lot longer. I was real proud of it, and I took it to a workshop with Stuart Batty, and he said, it's too long, it's going to get in your way. You're going to have to take it and put a chop saw to it. And I just cringed because it was a beautiful handle, my first one I made, and I was very proud of it. But let me show you what I'm talking about. Now here's a 1/4 inch detail gouge, and you can see it's got a much smaller handle, probably approaching 7 inches, 7 or 8 inches. And the reason is because you're going to use this in front of you. You're not going to use it like a typical bowl gouge, where in many instances you're going to have that thing up against your hip doing the turner's dance. A lot of times you're going to be doing beads and coves. And let me just show you an example. What happens if you get too long, like this one was originally. Mine was probably approaching this. The vendor that sells this one, I won't give their name, but the name of the product starts with a W and an R. They all got red handles, and they're all the same size no matter what size tool. This happens to be about a 3/8 inch bowl gouge, but let's pretend it's a spindle gouge, and let's say we're doing beads and coves. And we've got the bevel right here. We're going to come in to start that. We're going to come in at an angle like this. Well, you can see I can't get around it. It's getting in my turning muscle, which makes it just very difficult to operate. So when I come in on the back side, it's more leverage out here than I need, and when I come all the way around, it's going to get in my way. With a spindle gouge, you need to be able to get that thing in front of your body. Otherwise, it's just going to get in the way because of the turning you're doing. When you're bringing it in from the right-hand side on that bead, it's going to bump into you every time. So that's too big a handle. So one size doesn't fit all. Don't make everything big. All right, we're going to take the handle out of this old Benjamin's Best, my 5/8 inch out of this old Benjamin's Best. I don't know if you can see the gap in here, but you know it's not even a 1/16 of an inch of wood through here. There's not a whole lot of support. All right, what I'm going to do, I'm going to wrap this thing with a little piece of old belt, and I'm going to clamp it down here. I'm going to take an old wrench. I'm not much of a mechanic, and this was not mine, and I found one that would fit, 11/16. And I'm just going to, so I have something to hit on. Let's just see if we can't knock that thing loose. That didn't take any effort at all. And what I see though that they did do, they had a little more wood around it because they had taken the bar down. Not sure why. That's interesting. Okay, we've got this mounted in a chuck, and now we're going to put the ferrule on. So the next step, after I roughed it out and I put a tenon on the end so I can hold it in the chuck, we're going to size this to fit our ferrule. And I found a nice brass fitting that had some threads in it, and I thought, well, you know, those might be 16 threads per inch, so I measured them, and I think they are. So I thought, well, what the heck, let's just go ahead and thread. I know this is over the top, but let's put some 16 threads per inch on here where we can just screw it on. Okay, let's see if it'll work. I wrapped this piece of brass in a little bit of tape so I wouldn't damage the threads or the brass too much when I threaded it on. It's got it. Okay. All right, that'll give me a nice looking ferrule. I want to take this piece of brass down before we go much further, so let's go ahead and do that now. Take out the play, give it a little bit of support, and we're just going to ease this in. I'm going about 1200. I think I want to slow that down to about 600. There we go. And that looks good. I like that a lot. So, we got a nice ferrule on there. Let's talk about ferrules a little bit. Let me show a picture of some ferrules. You can make ferrules out of copper couplings. Let me show you a way to cut copper coupling here in just a moment. You can make them out of brass fittings. If you change out a large fixture in your kitchen, you'll have more brass than you know what to do with. A little steel, piece of steel pipe, you can use almost anything. The key is ideally you want to have a 1/4 inch of wood between the edge of the ferrule and the tool. On that Benjamin's Best, like I say, it was less than 1/16 of an inch. It was tiny. Okay, we're going to turn this, use this copper coupling for a ferrule. I'm going to cut it in half so I can make 2 ferrules out of it, but it's very cost effective and it's plenty big enough for that. So first thing we do is turn a wood mandrel that this will snugly fit on. We're going to bring up tailstock support with a 60-degree cone. I'm going to switch to a V-scraper, see if this doesn't work better. Okay, I got a couple of little rough edges on one of these, so I put a piece of tape for a little tighter on it. We're just going to use this V-scraper to kind of just smooth out the end here a little bit. So now we're going to take this down to here, but first we're going to go ahead and drill our hole. On smaller tool handles, you don't need to go to this much trouble, but on long ones, let me show you a little trick. We're going to use a twist bit, and then what I'm going to do, I've shaped this to just fit within this block, and we're going to take this. We're going to use my box tool rest, which normally doesn't get a lot of use, and we're just going to fasten it to act a little bit like a spindle steady rest to secure this thing, to keep it from bouncing around and wallowing out the hole. Let me put this on this side. You can see a little bit better. Okay. And this will spin freely, but this will give this some additional support. So we're going to turn this at about 600, and we're just going to move this up and slowly feed it in. What I failed to do though is mark the length of the drill bit hole, and it needs to match this shank, so it needs to go that deep. So we got to keep clearing chips. When it starts squealing, I like to go ahead and clear the chips. chips. Sometimes I like to take a little candle wax. You can see how hot this is, melting the candle wax just to reduce the friction. Always hold on to the Jacob's chuck when you're removing this. You don't want that thing to come swinging free. And there we are. And as I was afraid of, the Chinese, when they sized this, they didn't size it a ½ inch. They sized it 13 millimeter, which is just a hair larger than a half inch drill bit. So, anticipating that, I thought I'd go ahead and start with a ½ inch, see how it worked. So, one possibility is I hold on to this with a pair of pliers and let it spin its way on there. Which I think is what I'm going to do. Let's see how this works. I've got a pair of channel vice grips. I should go ahead and take that. I'm going to get that tailstock out of here. Bear with me. Okay, let's see if this works. We're going to use some vice grips and see if we can't burn our way through. Turn the speed up a little bit. And let's see what happens. I think this is going to work. Okay, and that's got it. So now that'll take some epoxy to hold that in, and that'll be good. Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and finish shaping this. I'm going to use a 60-degree cone to support into that hole. Give it some nice support. I've got it in the chuck. Size. Look at your tools. Find one that you feel comfortable with. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make this, I've decided to be the largest, the thickest part. That's going to be 1.5 inches. I'm going to come down to somewhere between 1/3 and 40% of the total handle length for the thinnest part, and that comes out right about there. And that gives me a target to shoot for. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to size this 1.5 inches. I'm going to size this 1 1/8, and I'm going to size this 1 3/8. And they don't have to be exactly, but that'll give me a pretty good feel for it. So I'm going to use the Spindle roughing gouge because I just think that's the easiest tool in our arsenal to take nice long sweeping cuts. Skew maybe, but this is a little easier. Set my vernier calipers to 1 1/8. Lock it in place. And I'm not going to get crazy about it, but we're going to go ahead and size it. Give us some target to shoot for. There we go. And we're going to go ahead and size this at 1 3/8. Let me point out, in case you weren't aware of that, you always round these over. You don't want sharp edges that are going to catch. Now I've got something to shoot for in these sweeping curves. I'm going to use a skew now to take some of those last cuts to minimize sanding. Anchor, rub the bevel, lift the handle, cut. Very nice, very nice. A little rust here. I'm going to go ahead and sand this off and then part it off. Okay, I've got this sanded up to about 220, first this way, then a few strokes this way. I'm going to put a couple of decorative V-grooves here, maybe a couple of here, one in the middle, a couple at the base. Using a spear point, one at the lowest point. A couple in the back. Some burn rings. Let's do that. Get this out of the way. Let me speed up a little bit. This is simply some copper wire. All I have to do is part it off. We'll be done. I think the safest way, we're just going to go ahead and part it off here with a skew and then touch it up with a little sandpaper, keeping speed under 1,000. Go. Now I'll give just a small bit to touch up with a skew. We didn't tear the fibers. A little bit of just a little bit of hand work with the sandpaper, and we'll be done, and we've got us a nice handle. Let me show you an alternative way of drilling, but keep in mind when you have Jacob's chuck mounted in your headstock, be sure to have a drawbar. You don't want this thing to come out for any reason. It can damage the inside of your Morse taper, but more importantly, it can come whipping out of there and cause you some serious damage. So what you're going to do is get your tailstock slightly out of the way. Make sure you got a little indentation here to start. Turn fairly slow. Get it going like this. And once you get it started, you can bring up the tailstock and then use this to continue driving it on straight by turning the hand wheel. And this may work better on a mini lathe. Maybe you can't use the tailstock because there's not enough room, but it allows you to make a bigger handle on a mini lathe by doing it this way. So that's another alternative approach. My larger tool handles, I like to flatten an area here so to minimize the rolling, and I can put my name on it. So we're going to do that now. And I've marked the side that I want up and the side I want down. Just a little flat place to put our name. I try to make the butts of my handles sometimes distinctive to recognize one from another, but I tend to wind up having to mark them with some type of code. X for scraper, K for skew, B for bowl gouge, P for parting tool, R for roughing gouge. So I can recognize what they are because I store them handle up in my tool storage. Okay, I'm going to mix up a little epoxy. I'm using some 2-ton epoxy, but frankly I'm not sure it makes a great deal of difference. Make sure you have an adequate amount. Mix it thoroughly. The 2-ton takes a little longer to set up than the 5-minute epoxy, so it gives you a little longer lead time to work on it. What I like to do is put a little bit in the hole. And then you put some on the tang itself. And then, because I've done this flat and I've got a grain pattern here, I want to have this side absolutely up, so I won't make any final adjustment and make sure I've got it adjusted. And then just swirl it in there. Swirl it in there. Make sure you got epoxy everywhere. I've got a little excess, and that's okay, it'll just squeeze out. That's when I'm going to lay this thing down and check for the grain pattern to get the flute aligned with this grain. And this slid right down in there. And I'm going to go ahead and take what's left over and put a little bit on top just to kind of dress up the top here. And then I'm going to set it upright in a vise so it'll sit. I want to clean up a little bit of that epoxy. Okay, the other thing I want to mention is when you drill your hole, you want to drill it anywhere from about 1.5 to 2.5 inches for the longer tools, 1.5 for small, somewhere close to maybe 25% the overall length of the tool. You generally want to drill your hole so the tool will stop in that hole at the base of it. One issue that presents is when you fill this up with epoxy and you tap this in and hammer it in, it could very well be that the epoxy is going to want to press it out. And one way to deal with that is when it's on the lathe, measure this very precisely as to your depth hole. Put a V-groove there to disguise it, and then drill a tiny little 1/16 of an inch hole. Do it in the side grain, and it'll almost be indistinguishable. But you'll do that in a V-groove. That way it'll relieve the pressure, and you might get some weepage, leakage of the epoxy through that hole, and you can of course easily wipe that off. We didn't have to worry about that on the tool we did with that Benjamin Best because of that shoulder. I drilled the hole a little bit deeper because I knew it was going to rest firmly against that that shoulder where the shank had been taken down, and so I had plenty of room at the bottom to absorb any excess epoxy, so that wasn't a concern. On smaller tools such as awls, of course, you can just, once you tap it all the way down, you can put it in a clamp between the top and the bottom and hold it, but that doesn't work too well on larger tools. I think I might have mentioned this before. I tend to use a colorful duct tape on my tools so I can spot them across the room when I go to a workshop or loan them out to somebody. It's a little easier to police up. It's a little hard for somebody to accidentally put one in their bag because they think it looks like theirs. So that's another idea. Well, that wraps it up on tool making. We covered why you want to make a tool, how you want to make a tool, some of the various tricks, what size tool, what kind of wood, and some other items. I hope this has been a good video for you. I had a couple of suggestions from a previous video when I did the snowman ornament. They said, why don't you make a video on making and using a round skew chisel. So I'll probably be doing that soon. Thank you for watching, and if you like it, thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing. Happy turning.